My name is Matt Nordgren, CEO and founder of a fund in Los Angeles called ARCADIAN Fund. And we do a lot of investing in the space, have for many years. This is going to be fun for me because this is what we talk about all the time as the most exciting frontier going forward in the cannabis industry is the brands. And so really excited to be able to talk to our panel, which we have one representative of here now. And really to kind of sit in almost your seat, we're going to ask them questions and talk about what the future looks like. Can we get the rest of the panel up here as well? And I think the first thing we'll do is we'll go down the panel, introduce everybody. They'll do a better job of that themselves. So one thing we probably want to do, which I assume everybody in here is in the investor sort of bucket, but can we get a show of hands just for our panel and myself to understand who we have in the room? If you are in the bucket as an investor at this conference, would you raise your hand so we can get an idea as to what the room looks like there? Great. And if you are an operator of a business in this space, maybe you could raise your hand as well. About 50-50 for information purposes. First of all, Kia Gravitas, thank you for having me. Flew here because this market has been fantastic as a case study for the world, and you guys have helped shape it and lead it. We're all excited about the future of this, and no place better to do that than talk about brands. Gentlemen, if you could introduce yourself and tell everybody your business and a couple of things about yourself to get things started.
Jeff Mascio with CannabisOne. We are a Colorado corporation that is vertically integrated but primarily focused on the retail segment of both the brands and also the retail dispensary.
Terry Donnelly. We specialize in alcohol-free and cannabis-infused beverages across the Canadian marketplace.
So I'm Jeff Maser. I'm CEO and founder of the Tinley Beverage Company. We're a THC and CBD-infused beverage company in California. This is our flagship product here. It's a cannabis-infused margarita. This particular one has no cannabis, unfortunately, but still a nice tasting drink. You can try some at the bar after, and it's available in dispensaries throughout the state.
Dan Anglin, CEO and founder, CannAmerica Brands. We are in 3 states, Colorado, Nevada, Maryland. In Colorado and Nevada, it's all primarily edibles, confections, gummies. In Maryland, it's concentrates of all types. We're waiting for edibles to be allowable. I've been in the infused product business for a long time.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen. That sort of identifies why we had this panel up here to talk about this. I think we can share some great information with you today as far as what we're all seeing, and from these seats, what do they see? ARCADIAN Fund, just to set the stage on my side, is a fund that focuses on mostly private opportunities, mostly based in the U.S. We've been having a lot of success, and our companies are in a great position to start looking at what we consider the third phase of the industry, which is focused on the consumer. A lot of times, in one of the conferences we were at, we had someone talking about the product side. It's similar to how Steve Jobs must have felt. Does this one work too? When he was in his garage, you know, looking at the future, he knew the technology behind what was possible, but the consumer didn't, and what was going to be created. I think this industry is there. The foundation's set, the science is starting to be figured out, and the technology from this plant is now ready for the consumer. Jumping right into that, gentlemen, can you talk a little bit about the differences in the market from Canada to the United States, and ultimately, where do you see the United States playing as brands get built and things start to move in different directions?
Well, I believe that it's very similar in the U.S. to prohibition of alcohol, and in that model, you see that when brands are relevant, they're still relevant today, even going back all the way to right after when Kentucky and Tennessee were moving things forward, much like Colorado and Washington have when we passed Amendment 64, which ultimately set the whole retail cannabis ball in motion. Whereas Canada has moved moved forward to full legal, but has failed to recognize that the brands are really where that's at, and is really still caught up in this cultivation and creating the raw materials that it takes to create the brands that the consumers want.
Yeah, I like in the Canadian marketplace, because I'm not in the States, but I've used this metaphor a few times where it's kind of like somebody gave me a public company and a few $1 million and said, we'd like you to launch a professional sports team. The league launches next October, so you got to actually hire all the players, buy all the equipment, start running plays, and next July we'll tell you what game we're playing. And so it's kind of this crazy world of not really knowing exactly what kind of beverages we can make, what kind of products are going to be available, what the framework for delivery and distribution is, whether or not branding will be allowed, what format and dosage, all these kinds of things. So it's still very much up in the air, but in order if you wanted to build a brewery today, if you started building today, it would be finished a year from now. So the lead times to get into the beverage space are very significant. The CapEx is significant, and we're kind of moving along with an expectation that the government will actually allow us to do what we're planning to do.
Great point. Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's certainly from a practical perspective right now, beverages are allowed in the U.S. And they may not be allowed in Canada for up to a year. From at least as of October. So just from a practical operating perspective, if we want to have drinks, we've got to be in California. But what's also good about at least the southern part of the U.S. is just that it's hot for 12 months of the year. And so for a category like beverages, that actually matters pretty significantly because dispensaries do report seasonality in their beverages, much like the mainstream beverage world. So, in a place like California that's, got 200 million tourists, 40 million residents, and perhaps most importantly, it's hot year-round. This is why, if you look in the non-cannabis beverage sector, drink startups just start in California. It's the best place to start. Either New York or LA is typically where, new concept beverage companies start. And, we just think it shouldn't be any different for cannabis beverages. The fact that it's also the world's largest cannabis market in the world helps quite a bit as well. So it really is kind of, a great kind of innovation center, California, and whether it's technology or beverages. So that's one advantage of starting there. But obviously, we hope to, expand nationally and up here as well when the time is right.
Okay. So branding and marketing are similar, but they're two different things. What branding does is creates a recognizable company based on a consumer's experience and their confidence in that quality, right? So if Canada, as it allows more product offerings, continues to restrict branding, how are consumers going to differentiate between the quality of one type of product and another type of product or similar products that are made differently? Cannabis is not, as you have probably learned, you can't just lump everything together. Businesses don't do it the same. The approach is different. The goals for the products and the consumer experience is different. And so if they want to restrict marketing, like they've done with, say, cigarettes and alcohol, that's different than prohibiting branding. I think branding is important. That's the difference between America and Canada right now, is that branding is extremely crucial in the American marketplace to establish what your company is and what you make and who you are and get that consumer confidence out of it. And that's tied to marketing, but it's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah, but it's an interesting world for that right now, especially given the lack of news outlets and media outlets with which you can get your message out there. One of our companies in the portfolio is High Times, which we're very soon to have public, and we believe that public vehicle will allow us to properly resource a lot of the media and event businesses out there so that this becomes more of an option until Rupert Murdoch and Facebook decide to get in the game, right? Going back to sort of the Steve Jobs analogy, you guys know this industry as well as anybody on the consumer side, infused products specifically. Can you talk about, maybe Dan, we'll start down here, your favorite product that you're involved with? And the second part of that question is, what do you see out there that you're really excited about that may not be on the market yet?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to flip it a little bit because you were talking about working in a garage. You know, Edipure started with injecting Twinkies with decarboxylated oil with syringes on a pool table, not in the kitchen. And I mean, this is exactly how the marketplace started. That was 2008. And then delivering them in duffel bags in a, old Lexus, right? Like literally, that was the beginning of one of the monsters of the cannabis industry. So things have changed a lot. And I think my favorite thing that I've been involved in is just the overall application of science with the care of the consumer. So whether it's microencapsulation, distillation, pesticide testing, I think that was extremely important. Colorado was the first state to require it, and it gave us legitimacy. It gave everybody in the business a pain. We all hated the costs and everything else that came with it, but it really gave consumers that confidence that the product that they were consuming, whether they were eating it, drinking it, putting it on their skin, wasn't dangerous. And so I think it's not just one typical product that I'm happy to have been involved in. I'm happy to have been involved in creating the policy in the state of Colorado, working on the policy in the state of Nevada, and I hope to have some kind of voice here in Canada to convince the government that the vast array of products is what the consumers are looking for. Almost anything can be infused with cannabis, and there's a reason why people are coming to, whether it's a Tinley drink or a CannAmerica gummy or whatever it may be, or flour, and there's a reason why the consumers want it. And so, I mean, here we are, pioneers in this industry, no matter whether you just got here this year or whether you've been here since 2008, that we're still all creating it as we go. And I think that's incredibly important, and we're going to see a lot more products being created in the coming years.
Agreed. Thank you, Dan.
Well, I'm biased what my favorite product is that I'm seeing in the market. I'm drinking one right now.
And you brought it on stage.
I brought it up on stage, yes. Unfortunately, no cannabis, but the fact that I'm actually drinking it here, obviously not just for some awareness, but the fact that I'm actually enjoying drinking it and will continue to drink it at the bar and encourage you guys to do the same, shows that it's actually a really enjoyable product. Margarita is the #1 cocktail in America. It always has been. It's just a great tasting drink that just people enjoy, so why reinvent the wheel? If people are used to sort of becoming, inebriated or intoxicated off a certain product format that tastes a certain way, is packaged a certain way, priced the same way, has the same theme, why change that? If that's just what people are used to and you can replicate that experience in all the same use occasions and social rituals, why change that? So margarita is a proven format. It tastes exactly the same, whether there's cannabis in it or not. And so, yeah, that's why it's my favorite product. We have a Moscow Mule out as well. That's a super popular cocktail in Los Angeles right now, as you probably know. And we're just going to continue. And I think that the possibilities are endless in terms of what's not in the market. I actually have not seen a cannabis beer on market. We're staying away from the beer category for a bunch of reasons, but know that there's a lot of room for some well-established brands to enter, and we do have a 20,000 square foot co-packing facility that we
tend to do some of that.
Pardon me?
Tend to do more of
to work with third-party brands that want to get into the cannabis
and really
market.
Everything on the beverage shelf is up for grabs when you talk about infused products, and you guys will just continue to look for different ways to do that.
There's a lot that's up for grabs, yeah. Absolutely.
Great, thank you for your perspective.
Well, I think my favorite product is actually our Brut Rosé. It's a pink champagne. It's absolutely delicious. And every person that we ever sample it for or provide a taste to just kind of can't believe that there's no alcohol.
Right.
And that product with the cannabis infusion is going to be, I think, a fantastic thing. I think one of the things that we're quite excited about working on the development of actually is medicinal beverages. We have certain formats and the ability to produce really medicinal quality beverages. And I think when you look at people who are suffering from cancer or Parkinson's or epilepsy, they're taking a bad tasting oil, or there's a capsule, which a lot of times is really hard for people to swallow. And right now in cancer, it's either smoking or a suppository are the #1 and #2 delivery mechanisms for really high dose medicinal doses of cannabis. And we've had conversations around creating medicinal wine-based beverages that are delivering 250 milligrams of THC. And so I think those kinds of things could be really life-changing for people that are in that situation, and could be a huge differentiating product for our business as we segment into from the adult use side into therapeutic, and then ultimately into medicinal beverages.
Rosé is a good one.
Yeah.
Saint-Tropez will never be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
all
so.
The beach cities, beware. Yeah. Thank you. I agree. I've seen your product, by the way. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
You know, Matt, I'll get back to the Apple question where you were asking where the parallels are. I think there's a lot of parallels in the sense that Apple's not first to market, but they needed all the technology to get to the point where it was when they launched their first products, i.e. the iPod and the iPhone. Cannabis industry is not that much different. We are getting to the point now where we have that technology. We have the ability to turn a cannabis plant into all of these consumable products that have various experiences that we know we can create. We know we have the ability to grow and cultivate. We know we have the ability to extract, right down to the various terpenes that are involved in the cannabis plant. And now we're finding that we can combine not just the cannabinoids and the terpenes of the plant, but the terpenes of other various plant products out there. So we recognize now that all of the technology is available, all of the tools that we need to make products that the consumer wants is now available, including the fact that nobody's done the carbonated beverages. I'll take it one step further than the cannabis beer, but carbonated beverages, because just recently, or until just recently, there was not a technology readily available that was producible in enough quantity without high expense that you could suspend it completely or dissolve it completely in a liquid. I can tell you that our R&D has done that. We are working on bringing that to market in the sense where it's odorless, tasteless, suspended, or completely dissolved, so you don't have the issue with a carbonated beverage. A lot of the beverages that are out there today, you add cannabinoids to them and they either sink to the bottom, or you've suspended them in something that is not a very good taste, and then you throw a bunch of sugar in it to cover it up. That practice is no longer necessary. Coming later to the game, as Apple would, you're able to produce products that are far greater and more superior because of the technologies that are now available. So,
great points, and thanks for even furthering the analogy. We're in a really interesting time, and I think some of this indicates how fun this is going to be going forward. One of the things we did at the fund early on was invest in Kush bottles and BDS analytics. The reason I bring those up are we've been trying to educate ourselves and understand from an investor standpoint, what are the new great things that are about to happen? And by having data, which is BDS's side of things, starting to see what consumers want, the fact that they're moving away from flower, not even moving away from flower from a volume standpoint, but looking at the other world of options, is very interesting to see where people want to go. On the Kush bottle side, how does the packaging change things? I know Canada is very restrictive, but that means the world to brands going forward and what you can do on that side. We want to take it a little deeper. And when I bring up these points, it's because as an investor, we're trying to go as deep as we can. I think that one thing we always talk about is how important IP is. 99% of the world thinks about cannabis and they think about flower or maybe a brownie. Right? This room and experienced people in the industry know that there's significantly more, but we're probably aren't even scratching the surface where the future is going to go, as you heard. So you have to think about IP, right? Apple's not Apple today if they don't have intellectual property behind their formulas, their technologies, or their delivery methods in our case. Can you guys shed some light on how important IP is to your brands? And I think we probably have 5 or 10 minutes left, but try to keep it short, but dig in as far as you can on real factual information, things you see that are important for building brands and why IP may be important in that equation.
I will tell you it is one of the most important pieces of the equation, and as I was alluding to just a minute ago in the last analogy, the carbonated beverage space, it's going to take a while before we enter into that because we want to make sure that the intellectual property is protected before we release certain products that are not protected intellectually. That's a difficult position to be in given the fact that we have federal laws in the United States that are working against us, and also the inability to do branded or infused products in Canada. So it's very difficult to move forward without that protection around the intellectual property. But what you can do as a company is build in the barriers in the economies of scale, where if you can drive your own costs down and have the branding pull it through, then the intellectual property will stay with you because no one will be able to rip it off, so to speak.
Right. I've spent my life in marketing and advertising, and one of the sayings that we always used to say was the only intellectual property that your competitor can't replicate is your brand. Yeah. And so, you know, I'm a big believer in having great brands that are differentiated and that are well supported. But that said, you know, we have a technology that we've licensed that's got multiple patents applied to it. There's also the ability for us to layer our own IP on top of those patents. We have intellectual property we're developing in our dealcoholization technologies, which are creating obviously the world's best tasting and most award-winning alcohol-free wine and beer that we've been on the market with for now about 10 years. And so, you know, we think we've got a great suite of both know-how and intellectual property differentiating, and then a great suite of brands that will help us compete. And all of that said, I'm in a business with wine and beer where the ingredients in the product and the recipes haven't really changed for 800 years for every competitor in the landscape, right? 95% of the yeast used to make beer originated from the Carlsberg Brewery 800 years ago, right? So, you know, it's all about branding from our standpoint, and we think that's going to be the differentiating factor.
I think branding is obviously going to be who's going to be the Coors and Budweiser, and everyone always talks about that, but different product categories here, because some products the consumer doesn't even know exist yet. Yeah. Right? I mean, there's things that Apple created that 20 years ago didn't exist, so as you create something new, that IP can be important if you can protect it.
But you got to remember as well that, you know, there's nothing really that the iPhone does that Samsung wasn't doing 3 years ago.
It was the brand on top of it.
It was the brand on top of it that made all the difference.
Yep. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on your brand and the IP around infused products that you're seeing and excited about.
Sure. So yeah, as a fellow beverage guy, I agree with Terry that brand in beverage and most consumer packaged goods products are brand is key, and that intellectual property is, I agree, something that no one else can replicate. That being said, we are living at a time when cannabinoid infusion technology, particularly with regards to making water soluble, is very much a new science. And so that is something that is critical to the success of any infused product, and particularly beverage, which in many ways is even harder to work with than, you know, gummies or brownies or other sort of solid infused products. So we're right now doing a combination of licensing third-party IP and layering that with some of our own internal formulation. There are more and more technology companies coming at us with solutions for water solubility. I mean, we're at a point where we're perfectly happy with ours. It's the combination of suspension, even disbursement, taste masking, terpene effect, acceleration, all that stuff. We're happy. It obviously is going to continue to get better and better. And again, I think it'll always be a combination of internal development and licensing. But further to that point, there's a bit of a commoditization of the infusion science, but there's a whole sort of value chain in building a beverage company. It's not just about formulation. There's tons of IP around scaled manufacturing SOPs, distribution SOPs, and merchandising as well. And beverage is very much an impulse-driven category. Grab and go is very important. Right. The ability to display properly and merchandise properly on shelves really is make or break for beverages. Right. And then on the so SOPs and best practices and branding and IP around just the merchandising on shelves is critical. Distribution is very difficult because drinks are much larger and heavier than pretty much any other category of cannabis product. So excellence in distribution is critical. And so there's this whole sort of value chain that's needed, everything from R&D to formulation to branding to manufacturing to distribution and merchandising. That is really what Coke and Pepsi and Cott all have, which has given them the market share that they do, and it's really that downstream stuff where you need the IP in addition to the infusion science.
Great perspectives, and I think important again to go back to the different product categories, because Dan, on the end, maybe we can pivot to the science aspect. GW Pharma, I think, is a $5 billion market cap or somewhere around there, and it's because of the fact they have the IP. If you're a medical product that needs 3 phases of clinical trial research, now that becomes where your real value can be. So depends on where you sit in the shelf and what type of product it is. Could you tell us a little bit about the science side and what IP means to the stuff you've worked on as well?
Sure. I mean, I was operational, and now I'm not. We are an intellectual property company, so that's what we are. So we rebranded from Americana to CannAmerica so that we could trademark, copyright in multiple countries. And procedures and packaging and branding is really where the IP is. The problem I think most people face, what I've heard a couple of times, is just that the type of technology is so readily available at conferences and on YouTube and everything else. And I mean, it's patentable, but in the United States, not really. So if you want to, monetize this thing you've created, you need to either allow one of these manufacturers access to it or try to start your own company. Right. So probably by the time federalization happens in the United States, most of these types of techniques that everybody in the marijuana industry protects with their life are just common knowledge, and that will be the argument by pretty much every IP attorney that these are, exposable to everybody, right? Microencapsulation, whatever it may be, right? Everybody knows
GW Pharma is not going to own CBD?
GW Pharma is a little bit unique in the fact that they're working directly with the United States government, which actually has the patent to the cannabis plant, right? So that's a scam in and of itself that's happening in the United States. But I mean, that's another subject altogether, right? Yeah. I think truly branding, packaging, procedures, quality measures, that's what's protecting, in the intellectual property. And then the hardest part is it's mostly human capital. It's the team that you built and the loyalty that they have to the company and treating them right and treating the consumers right. And there's so much of a human element here, even though we're always talking about science and technology. These guys in this industry just put everything on YouTube, so it's not possible to protect these things as they're invented on a daily basis until it's patentable.
Thank you. I'd like to do kind of a fun thing that we would like our panelists to be able to sort of drive and engineer. Give us something interesting that you're working on today, real application-wise, that you think this room might be interested to hear. It could be anything. Obviously, consumer products is our category, but something that you think this group needs to hear.
Well, I will tell you from our perspective, we're working on nearly everything that the consumer is seeking. So us being more of a house of brands, we're looking at from topicals all the way to the carbonated beverage space, and then basically trademarking all those formulas so that we can use those exclusively as our brand. Now, that being said, one of the most interesting things that are coming out is in the area of sex lube, which has been touted as a
See, it works.
And we know it does. So we have the sales that are starting to reflect that, and it's very interesting. So
wow, that is interesting. See, you just got to open it up, and you never know what you're doing.
You just never know.
We're actually just about to publish a white paper on the relative attributes and social harms of alcohol related to cannabis. And the data that's come out of the Canadian federal government is actually quite profound. We've basically been able to discover that for every dollar in revenue that the alcohol industry generates in Canada, about 56 cents is actually a social harm cost, with about 80% of that money is healthcare costs from the over 200 diseases that are caused by alcohol. And so when you actually you remove the criminal justice component of the social harm cost, what we discovered is that the healthcare cost of cannabis to alcohol is roughly 5% of what alcohol costs. So, the message from our standpoint to the regulators is if they really, in Canada, their stated policy from the federal government standpoint is harm reduction, health protection, and data-driven. And those are the three pillars of their strategy around what they've built from a regulatory framework. So they were really interested in harm reduction, health protection, and being driven by data. Using their own data, what they would do is prohibit the advertising of alcohol and allow cannabis to be sold wherever alcoholic beverages are sold, so that consumers could choose the safer and healthier alternative.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So that's what we're
We'll be
working
there
on.
soon. And
That's what we're working on.
get to scale.
Yeah.
That's going to be a fun day.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Well, that's music to my ears for sure as well.
Yeah.
So for us, really, people always look at us. The first thing they see is our brand, and obviously that's a huge part of our company and our IP. But what we're also trying to do, our big project, is actually building the cannabis beverage infrastructure in California. There are sort of a few bottling lines out there that have licenses and so forth. We're trying to build really a very large scaled one for all different beverage formats. It's a 20,000 square foot facility. And it's not just R&D and manufacturing, but it's also really the sweet spot, at least for beverages, which is distribution and merchandising. So we also have a distribution facility on the campus. It's just south of downtown Los Angeles. And it's really sort of that ability to deal with much heavier products that isn't widely available in California right now by distributors, because they're used to carrying these small, light sort of cannabis bags of leaf and vape pens. So, as soon as they do the math on drinks and they're larger and heavier, they might sort of think twice about having them on the truck. So we really want to make sure that we have a distribution capability and assets and infrastructure for the beverage category for the benefit of our own products as well as third-party ones as well as good merchandising presence on beverage shelves.
Thank you. Dan, give us something real interesting.
Yeah, as the CEO of a publicly traded company, our ticker is CANA, C-A-N-A. I can't really make future forward statements, right? So what I can say is that I'm personally working towards policy changes in the United States. I'd like to be involved in Canada as well. I'd also like to get to a point where once we've broken the veil of federalization and interstate transport can happen, that we kind of break up this idea of vertical integration, and that one house should have a big brand with every single vertical in it. I think that that's not how most products are created. And I think that people who recognize brands for what they're good at really want them to focus on what they're good at. And I think we've just kind of been pushed into this, make everything under one house, no matter what type of vertical it is. And it's really kind of a product of the fact that, we're limited to the available raw materials that are in our geographic location that makes it okay. And I'd really like to see Oregon be able to ship cannabis across the country. I'd really like to see Kentucky become the epicenter for hemp. I'd really like to see all of these different areas and different manufacturers and different producers kind of focus on their wheelhouse. And what you then see is brand recognition based on the quality of their product line and the innovation within that space, right? I'm not saying that brands can't be everything to everybody,
Right.
but that's where we've been pushed.
Yep.
Just simply because of the way that the regulatory structure works in the United States and in each individual market. It's why our company is focusing on acquiring other brands in the other verticals underneath our umbrella, is not so that it's CannAmerica everything, CannAmerica suntan lotion and eyelash drips or whatever. We want to be able to see brands being recognized for what they do well, and see it happen on an interstate.
Those are great perspectives. Thanks, guys. Speaking of a lot of product categories out there, I know we keep harping on that, but has anyone seen the white paper that was sent to the Trump administration to build the wall in Hempcrete? It was hysterical. It was like environmentally friendly, 1,000th of the cost. You could have the Mexico team build it. I mean, it was hysterical, but just goes to reiterate the fact that there are so many product categories, both byproducts and infused products, that are coming. It's so exciting. As an investor, and this is sort of where we wear our hat is, how do you decide what's what? And I would encourage all of you to reach out to these gentlemen specifically on things they're doing. Reach out to someone like me who runs funds, who spends their life assessing opportunities, similar way to people like Kia, but in a different perspective. ARCADIANFund.com is ours. With our remaining time, which I don't think we have much of, let's do a little bit of Q&A. Is there anybody here? Yeah, sir?
Thank you. rec market is big, but for the medicinal side, the CBD oils and infused foods and beverages, are companies focusing, instead of treating healthcare problems, are they working on medicinal benefits that's a health benefit? It can help make sure you maintain your health. So I'm wondering if that's an option for the medicinal market.
It definitely is. I think one thing we all have to understand is everyone's body receives these cannabinoids in different ways, right? I mean, there's 18,000 registered strains. Every one of them, if you took the same one as your buddy, you have a different reaction. So part of that is understanding how your body receives it. A lot of great technologies out there that are going to help people understand that part better. But then for the products going into it, I might want to ask you guys your opinion.
I mean, wellness, dietary supplements, these are all areas in the United States where you can manufacture and distribute in the unregulated marketplace as long as you don't make health claims. Typically what we've seen in markets is medicinal markets either shrink or, in the case of the state of Washington, are eliminated once recreational begins. I think that perhaps maybe Canada might be a different animal because there's been so much investment nationwide into the medicinal side of things. But our focus as we look outside beyond the regulated marketplace is wellness. And it's going to take federalization in the United States and the FDA to do 10 years of studies in order to make health claims.
Great point. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. My name is Virginia Vidal. I'm the founder and CEO of a Cannabis Infused Teas company. We are well-known throughout Canada, well-known brand. We have great packaging. Like you were saying, we're a very recognized brand, and I just wanted to say I wish there was a female representation there. But since there isn't, I decided to introduce myself, and if any of you gentlemen would like to work for a well-known cannabis industry in Canada that is in the infused beverages space, please talk to me afterwards.
Thank you for saying that. And by the way, I could speak for the panel. We also agree with you that female empowerment is a big part of what we do. The luxury of this industry and the responsibility actually is the fact that we get to build this big of an industry the right way from the beginning while everybody else is trying to reverse engineer that. So we certainly are sensitive to that. Thank you for saying that. But we feel the same way about minorities and sustainability. This industry has a really cool process ahead, and we did have a women's panel in here just before this as well. Do you guys have any thoughts on women-specific products that you'd like to bring up?
Actually, 50% of our executive team is actually female, and that's by design. About 70% of our consumers who drink wine are female. Conversely, about 70% of the consumers who drink beer are male. So we actually have, I think, a great amount of perspective that's coming in from those customer bases that are feeding into brand design, feeding into product formulation, feeding into our distribution and packaging strategies. So it's obviously for us, it's a huge marketplace. It's going to skew, we think largely the way that alcoholic beverages skew, with 50% of the industry is going to be beer, 35% will be wine, and 15% will be cocktails.
Yep.
We just think that that's what people consume. That's the ratio in which they consume them, and that's mostly a taste and effect strategy.
Yep.
So we're going to formulate everything we do to match that segmentation.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question? Okay, thanks for joining the Infused Products section. It'll be available afterwards.